Take your hands off me, officer, because in less than 60 seconds, this entire mall is going to belong to the truth. Aaliyah Brooks said it without raising her voice, even as Officer Grant Miller held her beside the gleaming entrance of Belmont Center's most expensive jewelry store. The Friday crowd slowed around them. Shopping bags stopped swinging. Conversations faded beneath the soft music drifting from hidden ceiling speakers. Miller gave a short, humorless laugh, certain he was dealing with another frightened woman trying to sound important. He had no idea that every word he spoke was already being heard by people waiting less than a mile away. Aaliyah kept her breathing steady and looked past him toward the second-floor railing, where dozens of strangers had begun lifting their phones. Somewhere among them, a little black girl stood beside her mother, watching with wide, uncertain eyes. That was the moment Aaliyah decided she would not look afraid. Miller tightened his grip on her wrist and told the crowd to step back. He announced that she had been accused of stealing a diamond bracelet from Monroe Jewelers, though no one had searched the store, reviewed the security footage, or even asked Aaliyah for a receipt. Officer Tyler Reed stood a few feet away, younger, quieter, with one hand resting near his body camera. His expression shifted when Aaliyah calmly asked whether it was recording. Miller answered for him. "You don't get to ask questions here." Aaliyah's gaze moved to Tyler. "Actually, I do." Those 3 words changed the air. Rachel Monroe, the store manager, hovered near the doorway with both hands pressed together, her face pale beneath the bright display lights. She had made the accusation, but now she would not meet Aaliyah's eyes. Aaliyah noticed. She noticed everything, the trembling in Rachel's fingers, the way Miller positioned himself between her and the nearest camera, the faint click in Tyler's throat when he swallowed. 20 years earlier, Aaliyah's mother had stood in the same mall under the same cold lights, accused by another store employee, questioned by another officer, and sent home carrying shame that never belonged to her. That old case had disappeared into a file cabinet. Today would not. Miller demanded that Aaliyah open her purse. She asked for the legal reason. He called her difficult. She asked him to check the store inventory. He called her uncooperative. Then she requested the security footage, and for one brief second, Rachel looked terrified. Aaliyah saw it. So did Tyler. Miller stepped closer, lowering his voice so the crowd could not hear. "You should have walked away when you had the chance." Aaliyah felt the small silver pendant against her collarbone, warm from her skin, silently transmitting every word. She looked directly into Miller's eyes. "No, officer. You should have." Then every entrance to Belmont Center locked at once. The locks engaged with a series of soft mechanical clicks that traveled through Belmont Center like a secret passing from door to door. Shoppers turned toward the glass entrances, confused, while security guards checked their radios and received no explanation. Officer Grant Miller looked over his shoulder, irritation replacing confidence for half a second. Aaliyah Brooks noticed the change. She had learned long ago that powerful men rarely feared noise. What unsettled them was silence they could not control. 20 minutes earlier, she had entered the mall through the west doors carrying a worn leather purse and a small white envelope tucked inside her coat. The envelope held a birthday card for her mother, Lena, who would turn 62 the next morning. Aaliyah had planned to buy her a silver bracelet from a store they had avoided for 2 decades. Lena had never asked her daughter to return to Belmont Center. She had never needed to. Some places remained inside a family without being named. Aaliyah still remembered being 14 years old, sitting beside her mother at the kitchen table while an attorney explained that the mall security footage had somehow been erased. Lena had been accused of stealing a scarf she had already paid for. No evidence had been found, but the arrest report followed her for years. She lost her nursing position. Neighbors whispered. Store employees watched her hands. The charges were eventually dismissed, yet no apology came. Grant Miller had been a young patrol officer then. His name appeared on the final page of the report beneath a sentence claiming Lena Brooks had behaved suspiciously. Aaliyah had read that sentence so many times she could hear it in his voice. Now that same voice stood inches from her. "Open the purse," Miller said again. Aaliyah kept her hands visible. "After you provide a lawful reason and confirm that his camera is recording." Tyler Reed glanced down at the small red light on his uniform. It was still on. Miller followed her gaze. "Turn it off." Tyler hesitated. The mall music continued overhead, bright and cheerful, completely wrong for the tension gathering below it. Rachel Monroe remained beside the jewelry store entrance. Her name badge caught the display lights each time she shifted her weight. Aaliyah studied her carefully. Rachel was frightened, but not of the woman she had accused. Her eyes kept moving toward Miller. That detail mattered. "Miss Monroe," Aaliyah said, "did you personally see me take anything?" Rachel opened her mouth. Miller stepped between them. She already gave her statement. "I asked her." The words were calm, but they carried across the marble floor. Several shoppers lowered their phones just enough to listen. Rachel stared at Aaliyah, then at Miller. "I was told an item was missing." "By whom?" Aaliyah asked. Miller's jaw tightened. Tyler looked toward the store's ceiling cameras. One pointed directly at the main display case. Another covered the register. There were at least 4 clear angles. "We should review the footage," Tyler said quietly. Miller turned on him. "You should follow my lead." Aaliyah felt the pendant at her throat pulse once, a nearly invisible signal confirming that the transmission remained active. She did not touch it. She did not need to. Outside the locked mall, vehicles were already taking position along 3 surrounding streets. Inside, Miller reached for Aaliyah's purse. She stepped back 1 pace. Not in panic. Not in resistance. Just enough to protect the evidence inside. Miller saw the movement and smiled as though she had finally given him what he wanted. "There it is," he said. "Now you are refusing a lawful order." Aaliyah looked past him at Tyler. "Ask yourself why he does not want the cameras checked." Tyler's face changed. It was small, no more than a tightening around the eyes, but Miller saw it too. For the first time that afternoon, the younger officer was no longer watching Aaliyah. He was watching his partner. Grant Miller had spent 23 years turning hesitation into obedience. He knew how to fill a room with his voice, how to make store managers trust his instincts, and how to make younger officers believe that experience mattered more than procedure. Belmont Center treated him like part of the building. Security guards greeted him by name. Store owners called his personal number. Employees relaxed when he entered, because they assumed the uniform meant certainty. Aaliyah knew better. She had studied every complaint connected to him, every missing recording, every report that used the same careful phrases. Subject appeared nervous. Subject became uncooperative. Subject made a sudden movement. The words changed slightly, but the pattern never did. Black shoppers were watched, questioned, removed, and later blamed for the fear created around them. Most cases ended quietly. Some people accepted small settlements. Others stopped answering calls because they were tired of proving they deserved dignity. Miller had counted on that exhaustion for years. He looked at Tyler Reed now and recognized something dangerous in the younger officer's face. Doubt. "Do not let her turn this into something it is not," Miller said. Tyler kept his eyes on the camera above the jewelry counter. "Then the footage should settle it." Rachel Monroe drew a shallow breath. Her hands separated for the first time, revealing a folded piece of paper pressed against her palm. Aaliyah saw Miller notice it. His expression hardened. "Miss Monroe, go back inside," he ordered. Rachel did not move. "You told me to call as soon as she came in," she said. The words were barely louder than the music, but everyone close enough heard them. Miller's head turned slowly. Tyler looked at him. Aaliyah remained still, though her pulse struck hard beneath the silver pendant. This was the first direct statement connecting Miller to the accusation. "Rachel," he said, soft enough to sound almost kind, "you are confused." She shook her head. "You showed me her photograph 3 days ago." The crowd shifted. Phones rose higher. Miller stepped toward the store, blocking Rachel from view. "This is now an active police matter. Everyone needs to clear the area." Nobody moved. Aaliyah understood why he had chosen this location. The jewelry store sat near a service corridor with limited public access and one security camera that had recently stopped storing footage. He had expected privacy disguised as public order. He had expected Rachel to follow instructions. He had expected Aaliyah to react with anger. Instead, she gave him nothing he could reshape. Tyler touched the side of his body camera. Why did you have her photograph? Miller faced him. Because she is connected to an investigation. What investigation? One above your pay grade. Tyler glanced at Aaliyah. Are you under arrest? He has not stated a charge, she answered. Miller's composure cracked at the edges. Enough. His hand moved toward the pendant at Aaliyah's throat, but stopped when a voice sounded through Tyler's shoulder radio. The message was brief and formal. All Belmont units were ordered to remain exactly where they were. Tyler pressed the radio closer. Dispatch, identify the commanding agency. Static filled the pause. Then came the answer. Federal jurisdiction. The two words seemed to lower the temperature around them. Rachel closed her eyes. Tyler's hand fell away from his camera. Miller stared at the locked glass doors 20 yards ahead, where dark vehicles had begun appearing beyond the entrance. Aaliyah watched his reflection in the polished storefront. For the first time since he approached her, Grant Miller no longer looked certain that the uniform could protect him. Aaliyah did not turn toward the dark vehicles outside. She kept her attention on Tyler Reed, because she understood that Grant Miller had already made his choice. Tyler had not. Officer Reed, she said, check the store footage, confirm the inventory, and preserve your camera. Recording. Her voice carried clearly through the open space. It was not a request for mercy. It was a reminder of duty. Miller stepped between them. You do not give orders here. Aaliyah met his stare. Then follow the law without being ordered. The words landed harder than a shout. Tyler looked toward Rachel Monroe, who still held the folded paper in one hand. What is that? He asked. Rachel hesitated, then opened it. The page contained a printed photograph of Aaliyah entering a federal office building 3 weeks earlier. Beneath the image were the words "Call Officer Miller immediately." Rachel's voice trembled. He gave this to me. He said she might come here and ask questions about old security records. Miller reached for the page, but Tyler stepped forward and took it first. The movement was small, almost polite, yet it changed the balance between them. This is evidence now, Tyler said. Miller's face went still. You are making a serious mistake. Then explain it, Tyler replied. Aaliyah watched the younger officer straighten. Until that moment, he had stood like someone waiting for permission. Now he looked like someone beginning to understand that permission and responsibility were not the same thing. Rachel moved closer to the glass counter. There is no missing bracelet, she admitted. A murmur passed through the crowd. The inventory was correct this morning. Officer Miller told me to report one missing if she entered the store. Miller turned sharply. Be careful what you say. Rachel flinched, but Aaliyah spoke before fear could close her mouth. Let her finish. Miller looked at Aaliyah as though her calm offended him more than anger would have. You think these people are going to believe you? They do not have to believe me, she said. They only have to see the record. She nodded toward the ceiling cameras. Tyler followed her gaze. He walked to the register and asked Rachel for access to the security system. Miller ordered him to stop. Tyler entered the manager code anyway. The monitor brightened, showing 4 camera views from inside the store. Aaliyah appeared entering alone, browsing near the silver display, speaking briefly with Rachel, and placing nothing inside her purse. The footage was clear. No theft. No suspicious movement. No missing item. Tyler replayed the video twice. Each time, Miller's accusation became smaller and the silence around him became heavier. I am preserving this recording, Tyler said. Miller's hand moved toward his radio. Aaliyah noticed the quick glance he gave the service corridor. He was not looking for help. He was looking for an exit. That hallway is locked too, she said. Miller stopped. You planned this. I gave you every chance not to. Outside, more vehicles arrived along the curb. Inside, the mall lights reflected across the polished floor like a bright line dividing what had happened from what could no longer be hidden. Tyler removed the memory card from his body camera, placed it inside an evidence envelope from his belt, and sealed it in full view of the crowd. Then he faced Miller. I am not turning this off. Miller's eyes settled on the sealed evidence envelope in Tyler's hand, and something cold passed across his face. For years, he had controlled the story before anyone else could write it. Reports were adjusted. Recordings disappeared. Witnesses were called unreliable. Complaints were buried beneath official language until the truth looked like confusion. This time, the evidence was standing in front of him, sealed, recorded, and watched by hundreds of people. "Give me the card," Miller said. Tyler did not move. "No, sir." The answer was quiet, but the crowd heard it. Miller stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You are ending your career over a stranger." Tyler looked at Aaliyah, then at Rachel, then at the clear footage still glowing on the store monitor. "I think I was ending it by following you." Miller's expression tightened. He turned toward Aaliyah as though she had caused the younger officer's defiance. "You walked in here looking for trouble." "I walked in here looking for records," she replied. "You brought the trouble yourself." The silver pendant at her throat gave another soft pulse. The federal team had heard enough, but Aaliyah knew the final minutes still mattered. Miller had to reveal what fear made him protect. He reached toward the store counter and shut off the monitor. The screens went dark. Several people in the crowd protested, but Aaliyah raised one hand, asking them to remain calm. "The recording has already been copied," she said. Miller looked at her sharply. "You do not know that. I know exactly what was preserved." His attention dropped to the pendant. For the first time, he seemed to understand that it was not ordinary jewelry. "Take that off," he ordered. Aaliyah remained still. "You have no lawful reason to seize it. You are interfering with an investigation." "There is no theft investigation." Rachel found her voice again. "There never was." Miller ignored her. He reached for the pendant, but Aaliyah stepped back, keeping both hands visible. Tyler moved between them. "Do not touch her." The words surprised everyone, including Tyler himself. Miller stared at him. "Move." "No." The bright mall music stopped without warning. The sudden silence exposed every small sound, the hum of the display lights, the distant splash of the fountain, the nervous breathing of shoppers pressed behind the security line. Aaliyah could feel the cold air from the overhead vents against her face. She looked toward the little black girl near the railing. The child was still watching. Aaliyah straightened her shoulders. Miller followed her gaze and noticed the phones, the witnesses, the expressions that no longer belonged to him. His authority had not vanished, but belief in it had. That frightened him more. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, unlock the West Service exit." No answer came. He tried again. Static. Then a different voice filled every officer radio in the area. "All local personnel, remain in place. Federal agents are entering the building." Heavy footsteps sounded beyond the locked glass doors. Dark jackets moved into view outside, each marked with large gold letters. Rachel covered her mouth. Tyler held the evidence envelope tighter. Miller turned slowly toward Aaliyah. "Who are you?" She did not answer immediately. She let the question remain between them, stripped of arrogance and filled with the fear of a man realizing he had chosen the wrong person to. Silence. Then she touched the edge of the pendant and said, "Someone who gave you every chance to do the right thing." For several seconds, nobody moved. The words remained in the air while the fountain continued spilling water into its stone basin, soft and steady, as though the mall had not changed at all. Aaliyah could hear her own breathing beneath the silence. In through her nose. Out slowly. Her mother had taught her that rhythm years ago at the kitchen table, after the accusations, after the lost job, after strangers had reduced Lena Brooks to a sentence in a police report. "Do not let their cruelty teach you cruelty," Lena had said. Aaliyah had carried those words through law school, federal training, and every room where people assumed calm meant weakness. Now she stood under the same cold lights that had once followed her mother out of Belmont Center, and the past felt close enough to touch. Grant Miller watched the entrance, but Aaliyah watched the crowd. The little girl near the second-floor railing had slipped her hand into her mother's. Her face held the frightened question children learned too early when authority looked different depending on who stood before it. Aaliyah did not want the child to remember a black woman shrinking. She lifted her chin and placed both hands calmly at her sides. The red mark around her wrist had begun to darken, but she did not hide it. Tyler Reed noticed. His gaze moved from her wrist to Miller's face, and the last trace of uncertainty left him. "You knew there was no stolen bracelet," he said. Miller did not answer. "You had her photograph before she arrived. You ordered the camera turned off. You tried to take the recording." Each sentence came more steadily than the last. Rachel Monroe leaned against the glass counter, her shoulders trembling. "He told me it would only be a conversation," she whispered. "He said no one would get hurt. He said she was trying to destroy good officers." Aaliyah looked at her without anger. Rachel had made a choice, but fear had shaped it, and fear was one of Miller's oldest tools. "Tell the truth now," Aaliyah said. "All of it." Rachel drew a slow breath. "He came to my office 3 days ago. He showed me her picture and said to call him if she asked about archived security files. He told me to report an item missing so he would have a reason to detain her." Miller finally turned from the entrance. "You are both confused." His voice had lost its weight. It sounded smaller beneath the high ceiling. Aaliyah felt the pendant pulse again. A signal. The doors would open soon. Yet she did not feel triumph. She felt the ache of all the people who had stood where she stood without a federal team outside, without hidden transmitters, without anyone powerful listening. Their names were inside the files she had spent 2 years studying. Mothers. Students. Veterans. Workers finishing late shifts. People who had been told that their fear was guilt and their questions were resistance. The glass doors unlocked with a soft click. Still, Aaliyah did not look away from Miller. "This was never only about me," she said. Beyond the entrance, figures in dark jackets approached in measured steps. The little girl upstairs squeezed her mother's hand. Aaliyah saw it, and for one quiet moment, she imagined Lena standing beside her. Not defeated. Not erased. Simply waiting for the truth to enter. The glass doors opened, and Special Agent Daniel Hayes entered first, followed by 12 federal agents moving with quiet precision. Their dark jackets carried gold lettering across the back, but it was the silence around them that changed the room. No one shouted. No one rushed. They simply formed a wide circle around the jewelry store, the service corridor, and every possible exit. Grant Miller looked from one face to another, searching for someone he could still command. He found no one. Hayes stopped 10 feet from Aaliyah. His eyes went briefly to the red mark around her wrist, then to Tyler Reed holding the sealed evidence envelope. "Status," he said. Tyler swallowed once. "The theft allegation was false. The store footage confirms it. Officer Miller instructed me to disable my camera and attempted to seize a recording device. The manager states that he directed her to create the complaint." Miller lifted his hand slightly. "This is being misrepresented. I was acting on information related to an active investigation." Hayes did not look at him. "Whose investigation?" Miller hesitated. That pause answered more than words could have. Aaliyah reached beneath her coat and removed a slim identification case from an inner pocket. She opened it slowly and held it where Miller could see. The seal of the United States Department of Justice caught the white mall light. Beneath it was her photograph and full title. Senior Civil Rights Investigator Aaliyah Brooks. Rachel stared. Tyler's eyes widened, though part of him had already known she was more than Miller wanted her to appear. Aaliyah closed the case. "For the past 2 years, our task force has investigated falsified arrest reports, selective enforcement, intimidation of witnesses, and the destruction of evidence connected to this district," she said. Miller's face lost what little color remained. Hayes opened a black folder and removed several documents. "We have sworn statements from 17 former detainees, financial records linking private security contractors to off-book payments, and archived radio traffic recovered from county servers." He turned one page. "We also have the original report from the Lena Brooks case." The name struck Miller differently. His gaze snapped toward Aaliyah. Recognition came slowly, then all at once. "Brooks," he whispered. Aaliyah held his stare. "You remembered the name after all." 20 years earlier, Miller had signed the report that painted her mother as suspicious, unstable, and uncooperative. He had claimed the store camera malfunctioned. Federal technicians had recently recovered a backup from an old insurance archive. The footage showed Lena paying for the scarf, leaving the receipt on the counter, and being stopped anyway. It also showed Miller removing the receipt from the evidence tray before the report was completed. Hayes placed another document on the glass counter. The recovered footage was authenticated this morning. Miller looked toward Rachel as though she might defend him. She stepped away. He looked toward Tyler. The younger officer remained beside Aaliyah. Then Miller noticed the pendant again. That was the device, he said. Aaliyah shook her head. It was one of them. Tyler's body camera had transmitted continuously to a federal server from the moment he refused the order to shut it down. The jewelry store cameras had been mirrored remotely. Even Rachel's folded instruction sheet had already been photographed by 3 witnesses. There was nothing left to erase. Hayes finally faced Miller. Grant Miller, you are being detained pending federal charges related to obstruction, evidence tampering, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Miller looked around the mall, surrounded not by enemies, but by witnesses. Aaliyah watched him understand the truth. He had not lost control when the agents arrived. He had lost it the moment Tyler chose not to delete the record. Special Agent Hayes allowed the silence to settle before giving his next instruction. Officer Reed, place your service weapon on the counter and step aside until your statement is recorded. Tyler obeyed immediately. He removed the equipment carefully, set it beside the sealed memory card, and raised his empty hands. There was no anger in his face now, only the exhausted clarity of someone who understood that doing the right thing did not erase the wrong choices that came before it. Miller watched him with disbelief. You are going to let them destroy everything we built? Tyler looked at the polished floor between them. No, sir. I am going to tell them what we built it on. Hayes assigned 2 agents to escort Miller away from the crowd. Before they approached, Aaliyah stepped forward. Read him every right, she said. Document every item you take. Keep the cameras running. Miller stared at her. He had expected humiliation, perhaps the same cold treatment he had given others. Instead, she insisted that he receive the protection he had denied them. That choice seemed to unsettle him more deeply than revenge could have. After everything you think I did, he said, you still care about procedure. Aaliyah's voice remained even. Procedure is not a favor we give to people we like. It is what keeps power from becoming personal. Hayes nodded once, and the agents followed her instruction exactly. No spectacle. No unnecessary force. Just a clear record, spoken rights, and careful hands preserving evidence. Rachel Monroe stood near the jewelry counter, tears gathering in her eyes. I knew it was wrong, she said. I kept telling myself I had no choice. Aaliyah turned toward her. Fear explains a choice. It does not erase it. Rachel lowered her head. What happens to me now? You tell the truth under oath, Aaliyah said. You turn over every message, every photograph, and every instruction he gave you. Then the court decides what accountability looks like. Rachel nodded slowly. It was not forgiveness, but it was a path back toward honesty. Tyler approached Aaliyah after an agent collected his badge for review. I should have challenged him sooner, he said. There were other stops. Other reports. I saw things that felt wrong, and I convinced myself I was too new to speak. Aaliyah studied him for a moment. Then do not use today to feel brave. Use it to become honest. His eyes reddened. I will testify. Even when people call you a traitor. Especially then. Around them, witnesses began giving their names to federal agents. Store employees brought archived records from back offices. Mall security officers unlocked cabinets containing old incident logs. What had started as one false accusation was opening doors that had remained closed for years. Miller paused before being escorted through the entrance. He looked back at Aaliyah, and for the first time, his voice held no command. Was this about your mother? Aaliyah glanced at the store where Lena Brooks had once been treated like a criminal for carrying something she had already purchased. It began with her, she said. But it became about everyone you believed would never be heard. Miller lowered his eyes. Outside, the afternoon light reflected across the federal vehicles and the gathered crowd. Inside, Aaliyah placed one hand over the pendant at her throat. Justice had finally arrived, not as revenge, but as a record no one could erase. 3 weeks later, Belmont Center looked almost unchanged. The same soft music floated beneath the high glass ceiling. The same fountain sent thin streams of water into the stone basin. Shoppers moved between stores carrying paper bags and coffee cups, unaware of how close the building had come to becoming another place where the truth disappeared. Yet near the entrance to Monroe Jewelers, a new bronze plaque had been mounted on the wall. It listed the names of people whose complaints had been reopened after the federal investigation. 17 names appeared in clean black lettering. At the center was Lena Brooks. Aaliyah stood several feet away beside her mother, watching the morning light move across the metal. Lena wore a navy coat and held the white birthday card Aaliyah had carried on the day of the operation. She had read it so many times that the fold had softened beneath her fingers. For nearly 20 years, her name had existed inside an official report as a warning, a suspicion, a story written by someone else. Now the report had been formally withdrawn. Her nursing record had been corrected. The city had issued a public apology. None of it could return the years she had lost, but the truth no longer lived only inside her family. Lena stepped closer and touched her name with 2 fingers. "I used to think justice would feel louder," she said. Aaliyah looked at the plaque, then at the shoppers passing behind them. Maybe the real kind does not need to shout. The investigation had continued after Miller's arrest. Rachel Monroe surrendered every message and testified before a federal grand jury. Tyler Reed admitted that he had remained silent during earlier incidents and provided records that helped identify 3 additional officers involved in falsified reports. His badge remained suspended, and he accepted that cooperation did not erase responsibility. Grant Miller faced federal charges and, for the first time in his career, could not control the language used to describe his actions. Every statement was recorded. Every piece of evidence was preserved. Every person involved was given the same legal protections. Aaliyah had insisted on that. Not because Miller deserved kindness more than anyone else, but because justice lost its meaning the moment it became revenge. Lena turned toward her daughter. "Did you ever want to hurt him the way he hurt people?" Aaliyah considered the question. She remembered the locked doors, the cold lights, and the little girl watching from the second floor. "I wanted him stopped," she said. That was enough. They entered the jewelry store together. A new manager greeted them without suspicion and opened the silver display case. Aaliyah chose a simple bracelet, smooth and unadorned, with a small engraved word on the inside. "Seen." She fastened it around Lena's wrist. Her mother looked down at it, and for a moment neither woman spoke. Outside the store, the fountain continued its patient rhythm. Sunlight crossed the plaque and warmed the names that had once been hidden in forgotten files. Aaliyah took her mother's hand, and they walked toward the glass doors together. Kindness had not made her weak. Restraint had not made her powerless. She had faced injustice without allowing it to decide who she would become. Behind them, the plaque remained in the light, proof that dignity could be delayed, denied, and buried, but not erased forever. And as they stepped into the bright afternoon, one question remained for everyone who had watched the truth unfold: when power asks you to stay silent, will you protect your comfort, or will you protect what is right?